What do you believe is the power of testimony to inform and inspire real change?
Well, the power of testimony, of course, it comes in a couple of different areas. The first is this: we look back at history. The Nazis were meticulous at documenting everything, including the mass murder of European Jewry. And so we could come at this history through the documentation of the perpetrators themselves. But when you come at it through the life of the individual who survived it, you understand that history in a completely different way. Let me give you an example. During the November pogrom, which became known as Kristallnacht in November 1938, we got to learn about that through the eyes of the Nazis mainly, because of course they orchestrated the whole thing. And they photographed the thing, all the events that took place. And generally speaking, it was their reportage of those events which made it into our history. And we learned that, so many hundred synagogues were burned down and 91 Jews were murdered and 15,000 Jews were taken to the concentration camps the following day. And we see that through this external lens. And in fact, it's mainly through the perpetrator's lens. When you go into the Shoah Foundation's archive and you hear about that same day through the testimonies, you're now inside the house of the Jewish people that were being attacked. And you hear about, for example, feathers. Why? Well, because the Nazis, when they went into the homes and they were destroying them, tore into all of their eiderdowns, into their duvets, and feathers went all over the place. And what starts to happen is you get a picture from the inside of the house, the fear that built up, the resilience, the resistance, the fact that they were using strategies to outsmart the Nazis, including sending their own children out onto the streets so that they could hide among the crowds. You only get that through testimony. And so testimony finds us a way into that history, which is actually rooted not in the horror and the fear, but the living through. And as we know in Yiddish, to survive is überleben, to live literally live over the events. And what we see through testimony is how these individuals lived through and over those events to ultimately survive them. Once you get to that perspective, then the second thing comes in with testimony, and that is the human being that is at the heart of the testimony is not only reciting the facts like an archive of dry facts. We're not now going into a filing cabinet to go and find out what were the dates and the times and the places and so forth. What we find, for example, when young people talk to Holocaust survivors, they virtually never say, miss, after they've heard the story, could you just clarify, was it the 13th or 14th of May that you went on the transport? And what was the transport number? What they'll actually say was, what did it feel like to be dehumanized in that moment that you were deported from the ghetto? So it's about the emotions and the feelings. What was it like to lose your mother? Do you miss your mother? Do you feel anger towards the perpetrators? Can you forgive the perpetrators? These are the questions that these stories evoke in those that listen to it. And what is very powerful about that is that in the testimony itself are the answers to those questions if we want to find them, because the survivors themselves have given us that sort of roadmap through their lives to be able to answer the big questions that we have about what it means.